Alright, now we're going on to episode 4 of season 2 of Big Little Lies, which, of course, as always, we're going to get into all the spoilery stuff, so there that is. We were talking last week about the fact that, given the title of this episode, She Knows, being something that seemed like it was going to be this enormous bombshell, we talked about the fact that with this being the episode that's right in the middle of the season also, is this going to be like when all hell breaks loose, when there's a whole bunch of reveals, and we go in this entirely, it pushes everything in a totally new direction that's going to seemingly come to some big explosive end or whatever. But instead, I think we left this episode with more questions than answers, which is a really interesting way to take it this far in the game, especially since we've had so many revealing episodes come before this, so it's almost like it's at the start of this season it wanted to really throw a lot at us and really get our attention, and now it's sort of like biding its time in regards to where it's going to go. And yeah, some of it, that might lead to a bit of maybe some redundancy, but I don't know, I think I trust this show enough that even if it seems like it's kind of walking in place at the moment, that we are slowly but surely getting somewhere, even if we maybe don't realize that yet. So when we start off, it's always fun when the episode begins with Mary Louise going somewhere, especially if it's a party that she hasn't been invited to. You always get a sense that potentially something explosive could happen, especially when Madeline always seems to be the first person she runs into. But the thing here, especially after she was just basically kicked out of their house. But then, of course, there's a whole other thing going on as far as where she's ending up because of that. But before that, oh no, it's revealed in this scene, I suppose. But obviously the first thing I've been mainly talking about is I really want to know what's going to happen when Mary Louise meets Bonnie, given what happened. And we got that. And it's very... I mean, not that we expected something explosive immediately, because she's not going to, know right away. But I was just curious exactly how the interaction would look, and what it would feel like from our perspective. And yeah, Bonnie's playing it very cool, just hardly even looking at her at all. And I guess making her as least suspect as possible, because there's so much in this scene with Mary Louise walking into a party that she's uninvited to, and Celeste, who has just kicked her out of the house, is there, and she's just run into Madeline, who is always ready to confront her, and she's ready to confront. Probably the last thing that's on her mind is that she looked right at and complimented the person that shoved her son down the stairs, which is really interesting. So, of course, this scene builds into the confrontation between Celeste and Mary Louise, which ends with Mary Louise making some very biting comments about Celeste and her marriage to Perry, and exactly what he may have been doing, and how it through Mary Louise's eyes, could have been Celeste's fault. Which gets Mary Louise slapped so much that her glasses fly off of her face. And it's kind of in this moment, because we were talking about before how we kind of had the feeling that Mary Louise was going to go after the kids in some way, to take them away from her. And sure enough, we can kind of see that a war has been ignited with this slap that may go very much against Celeste, unfortunately. Poor Celeste is having all these fights physically and emotionally and mentally and all that, and every time she hits back, there's always consequences. It's a really terrible state for her. But so yeah, she ends up going to Dennis O'Hare, who's going to be her lawyer, who is apparently a very vicious lawyer, equally vicious in the way that Mary Louise wants to deal with things. And that I didn't catch all the dialogue, but I believe it was something like he advised her to call all the other law firms to keep them from representing Celeste. So that's going to be an issue. I mean, yeah, she's got, Renata in her corner and all that, but this battle is going to be very bloody, regardless of that, whether that means figurative or not. It's hard to say, because we know that this show has ended in death once before, and totally could again. That's kind of the question that's looming over this season altogether, is that, like I was saying before, we knew about the death at the very beginning, season one, and the whole thing surrounded it. But now that with this one, because it's not that way, it kind of has a different tone about it. But it's still like, this did lead to death before, and it really could again, even if it seems like it doesn't. But there's so many different ways in which that can come. Um, but before we go into that, there is a couple of things I want to say about that. But before going on this whole Celeste getting in this legal battle with Mary Louise, I was trying to think of ways that this is gonna the things that Mary Louise can use against her. I feel like are gonna start coming to light very quickly. Because at first you kind of think, what does she have on her? But then there's the whole thing of I was trying to remember exactly what all went down and what all everybody knew when she got in the car accident. The first time, at least, that we saw that she had a consequence to taking the pills. But then it was like, they get along. The kids get along with Mary Louise so well. We had the whole pizza scene this time, among many other scenes. We had the picture scene last episode. But it's like, is she gonna basically convince the kids to unwittingly throw Celeste under the bus? And what do they have there? And I immediately thought of the scene where she breaks up the fight, which inevitably led to one of them getting shoved to the ground, even though it was obviously her showing that she really wants them to not be what their dad was, even though they don't know what that is. But because they see it the way they do, with the way Perry's real persona was blocked off from them, that could really bite Celeste badly, unfortunately. So, and then I almost kind of thought if Mary Louise would go after the bartender that Celeste just had a one-night stand with, given that Celeste tells Madeline that she doesn't even remember this one-night stand happening because she was taking the pills again. And if Mary Louise could somehow get to the bartender and have the bartender, once again, unwittingly say that she was on something that completely blocked out what she was doing, that could be... Oh, there's so many things. There's so much ammo that Mary Louise has, it's terrifying. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And then we've got the whole thing with Renata going on, where she's obviously trying to put on this huge birthday party for Amabella, which seems to be like 5 times the size of her last one, which is almost like her intention. We pretty much know it's her intentionally saying "fuck you" to bankruptcy as it's happening to her in the most reckless way possible, which totally fits her character. But we also had this after she's had some things confiscated because of this giant chunk of money that was taken out in all this. It's all coming back to Gordon badly, and he's obviously now begging for forgiveness. We really kind of got to see him in that vulnerable moment at the party when he's like saying, I don't want to... It's like the reverse Ed Madeline situation, where in this case it's now the guy that's like really begging for that forgiveness, and it really doesn't look like it's going to be there anytime soon. Yeah, it really kind of does mirror both of those situations, even though it's 2 totally different things, and it's like we really... Right now, it is really hard to tell if forgiveness is going to be found in either one of those. But the line kind of sticks out when she tells Gordon that he is going to pay for this, which of course could just be Renata talking, which she does a lot, or it could be something else. Because I started to think back to when I saw season 1 twice, and the thing about it is when you watch season 1 a second time after you know everything, the clues are so incredibly blatant. Like, they're like right in front of your damn face, but if you're kind of like caught up in it and you're trying to take everything in, some things that seem obvious might just go right past you because you're really trying to catch everything. And it's like, I'm wondering, there's gotta be stuff happening in this season that's right in front of our damn faces, that a lot of people may already see. Like I said, for me, it's like, I feel like I'm trying so hard to get so much in, there's easily going to be stuff that just goes right by in passing if it's, casual enough, I guess, when we see it for the first time. Because, especially on top of this scene, when we see Renata, like, the way she's like cracking when she's talking about how joyful and happy this party is gonna be. And it's like there is something, especially when we get to the party itself, when it's like everybody's literally in costumes. And it's like when they're trying to basically pretend everything's normal. This is what was going through my head, and then of course, like 5 minutes later, Ed pretty much spells out everything in his exact dialogue, literally saying, we're in costumes, we're literally pretending. And it's like sometimes that's one problem with this show's dialogue. It's like sometimes it probably spells it out a little too much when the visuals really speak for it. But whatever. Ed needs dialogue, I guess. And then yeah, obviously that evolved into him. This is another thing, much like the Mary Louise Bonnie thing. It's like I've been really curious what the next Ed Nathan interaction was going to be after Ed knows what happened. And of course, Nathan tries to, throw out a life preserver and say, hey man, I know, believe me. And this is, like I said, I'm really not sure. I totally understand where he's coming from, but the way Ed is choosing to deal with this, I don't know how it's what it's doing with his character. It's like I said, I totally get it, why he would act out in the ways that he's been doing, but there also kind of comes a time where that's like the show's, like, one of the show's really big themes is, like, the whole putting on a show for other people thing, regardless of what your life is. And it's like, I do think there are some places to basically keep everything, like, just basically society in general, together. There will be times where you do have to pretend just a little bit. Like, everything cannot be all out there at once, all the time. And Ed doesn't quite seem to be able to pick his battles. So, starting with this... well, no, I guess Nathan was the one that started the physical altercation by pulling his hilarious afro wig down. But yeah, I just kind of felt like my face wanted to just cringe all the way into the back of my head watching the kind of crowd gather with this little pathetic fight they were doing. So yeah, but I do understand Ed's pain, but yeah. It will be interesting to see whether or not he does find it within himself, because obviously Madeline's really getting pushed to a breaking point here in regards to, is he sticking around just to torture her, or does he really want to stay? But he does allude to the fact that if he was going to leave, he would have. And I think we know Ed well enough now, especially from Season 1, to believe that deep down he does not want to leave her. She's like practically his entire life, so... but it is just a matter of how much of that is just sort of giving Madeline a taste of the misery that she's brought to him too. It's hard to say. It is a very... Like I said, either this marriage is going to fix itself, or it's gonna end really, really badly. But between the two of them, I can't really see it getting too bad. Even with the way Ed's being now, I feel like this has the potential to fix itself. I don't know that I can say the same about Gordon and Renata, which kind of brings me back to what I was going to say before, where we have this continuous thing with Bonnie and the water, that's really coming to a head with Bonnie's mom in a way I'm not quite grasping, which I'm assuming is the point if that's how they end the episode. It's like I think we're supposed to kind of be left with the question of, what the hell does it mean? Yeah, the whole visions she's having, where we had the scene of her, like, I'm assuming dunking young Bonnie into the water, was what that scene was last episode. And now she's having, like, full-on visions of Bonnie, as we know her now, just floating in water, presumably dead. And it's like, is this, like, a premonition? Is it symbolism? But, yeah, because obviously... Bonnie's been trying to keep her head above water, figuratively, the whole season, after everything that happened, but then there's also the thing of it almost feels like it's looming enough that it's like, is it more than symbolism? Is it, like, actually a premonition? Because there is the whole thing where, I'd forgotten until somebody mentioned it, recently, in a conversation. They were talking about how there's, like, the drowning theme, because there was also when, Celeste was explaining to Mary Louise that Madeline saved one of her kids while they were drowning, and Mary Louise got after her and said, like, well, where were you? So it's like drowning is in here somewhere, like, and it maybe it's gonna go past the symbolism stage into something else. Because like I was saying, are we leading to another death of sorts? And it's like, because for starters, the first one you might think, like anytime you think of something dramatic happening here, when the show's gonna finally reach its ultimate point, is Mary Louise comes to mind. It's like, is Mary Louise gonna in some way suffer the same fate that her son did? That almost feels a little extreme. I don't think it's gonna be that. But then there is. I actually started thinking about it with Bonnie afterwards. There's the whole idea, because we saw Bonnie like walking into the water and everything. It's like, is it going to be a suicide thing? But interestingly enough, before the thought like really occurred to me that we could potentially see Bonnie do something like that, um, which I don't, given her character, I'm not totally sure I believe she would do something like that. Because I guess that's coming from the fact that she seemed so well adjusted before this, but now this is the post Perry incident thing. I suppose anything could happen, and any character can change drastically mentally. But I also got the suicidal vibe from Gordon at the party when he was begging for Renata's forgiveness. It almost felt out of character enough that we were seeing a shift in him, and it's like, and this is the stuff you read about all the time, where people go from rich to poor, and a lot of them, get suicidal or actually go that far. And Gordon almost seems like a clear-cut case of that, like something you'd read about in like the real news. This whole story, which would go in line with Renata's line of him paying for it in some way, whether that's self-inflicted or not. I guess we'll find out, but. Yeah, I'm really getting it's weird. I wasn't sure how to word that, but it was like I'm getting a real suicide vibe from something. Um, but I guess we'll see what happens. So I think that's all there really is to discuss here. Oh no, there was one more thing. The whole paranoia thing that seems to really be growing. Particularly, there's two particular cases where the first one was at the party, I think, when everybody was kind of talking amongst themselves. And it was kind of shown at the beginning of the episode, without dialogue, that Madeline was the one that came up with the story that they all told the cops in regards to what happened to Perry and it being an accident and all that. And now this paranoia on top of everything else is building up on Madeline, and she's thinking that everybody's kind of turning on her a bit and thinking this story might be falling apart and the lie is going to soon rear its head. Um, and then there is the other one where Bonnie sees the detective at the hospital, who's there for a totally different reason, not related to them whatsoever. And sure enough, immediately she lashes out, because we know the guilt and all of that is like way in the back of her head, and it's like really coming forward. And so, like as we were talking about, Bonnie's gonna crumble in one way or another, and whether that's the most extreme way or not will remain to be seen. But and then there's the whole thing where the detective saw Madeline and was it Renata? I've already forgotten. Renata, Celeste, one of the two. It might have been Celeste actually. But it's by then also where last episode I was talking about how Mary Louise seemed to just materialize everywhere, almost in a supernatural kind of way, and now the detective was doing that in this episode also. And it's sort of like everything is like closing in. So like I said, if nothing has exploded yet, that point is coming with every episode. And then there's the title, which could mean a lot of things. Once again, the first instinct is probably always Mary Louise. Like, if there's a question, it feels like the answer is always Mary Louise. It's like, is she the one that knows? But then it's like, we got a lot of the detective in this episode. Is she the one that knows? But then there's the whole Bonnie's mom thing. So, yeah, I like the fact that nothing is too blatant here. Like I said, once we know everything, I'm sure it's all really right in front of our faces as it was before. But yeah, so like I said, this one did leave a lot of questions without blowing everything up quickly. But now I feel like that means if the more they're drawing it out, the more it's probably gonna blow up when it does happen. So that'll be interesting to see. So I guess we'll find out what this comes to a week from now. So until then, we'll have another review. I think we're finally back on schedule now, and no one's going to start doing videos again. And then we'll have the regular reviews, and well, not regular. Spider-Man's on Tuesday, Midsummer's on Wednesday, but all those are coming, and the verses and all that stuff. But as far as this goes, until next week, I think that's it.